Hello everyone, it's June from Artsy Lolico, and today I will show you a step-by-step tutorial on how to create a realistic watercolor hummingbird fairy right here on Procreate using our own custom-made brushes created by me. All 16 brushes and unique 3 texture canvases are going to be available on Etsy for you to purchase. This sketch is going to be available for free as well as the color palettes. Both links are going to be down below. If you find this tutorial helpful, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on that notification so you don't miss a thing. So let's not waste time, grab your iPad and open up your Procreate and let's get started. To start off, I am using currently a ridged canvas small version, and I'll use the wet on dry brush to start off with the painting. And then I'll create a new layer. And I like to use a light green emerald green color to start off the painting. And I'll keep the opacity at 100. Let's start with 35 size. And to start off, I like to start with the inside of the body of the light colors first. So here we go. And the way I like to color my paintings is to start with light colors and then mid-tones and then the darkest tones, and then I'll blend them after. Once the green is done, I went with a very light colored blue. And with this, I am going to go underneath the hummingbird of the belly and the feet area. This will give a lot of color variation in the hummingbird. And a little bit of color on the beak as well. And the third color that I'm going to pick is a very light pink color. And this is going to be going under the cheek area of the hummingbird. And we'll put a little bit of light pressure here on the cheeks. And now we're going to go into the mid-tones of the hummingbird. So we are going to create a new layer. And we're going to go a little bit darker this time with the colors that we already have. And you can easily do this by hovering your finger over the color. And you can now see the color that you can choose. And I'll go a little bit darker now. And I do really like this color, so we're going to go with this. And I'll make sure to go around the head underneath the hat and behind the wings. And I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom piece of the hummingbird with the indigo color blue. And it's basically rinse and repeat with the pink part as well for the cheek of the hummingbird. Now before we move on to the blending, I'm going to begin coloring the eyes and the beak of the hummingbird. So we'll move closer up to the eye and the beak. I'm going to start drawing the eye, and I'll go with the darkest color, which is the black that we have, and then use the wet on dry brush. And we'll start drawing the eyes in a circular motion and leave out the white part in the middle to show some light reflection in the eyes. And the beak is also going to be black, but I'm going to reduce the opacity 50 to 40% and reduce the size because it's going to be very thin. And then I'll create a line that gives a little bit of transparency. And then I'll increase the opacity to 100 to make it darker at the bottom of the beak. I also like to put a unique white layer of small light underneath the eye to give more texture into the eyes. Now let's begin painting the hummingbird's fairy hat. And the light is coming from the left area, so I want to keep it a little bit light with some ambient light. So I went with a bit more ambient, warmer color, which is a bit orange peach color. And I'm going to paint the top left corner of the hummingbird's fairy hat. And then I'm going to create a new layer on the top. And I also added some light purple indigo color that we still had from the belly. From there, I added the darkest tone that we have with the hat just to finish off the hat that we already have. And don't forget to color the inside of the hat that you can sort of see in the corner of the left. Now let's move on to the hummingbird wing area, which is my favorite part. And hummingbirds usually have a lot of colors and variations on their wing, so we're gonna have a lot of fun with this. So I like to begin with a light blue color and begin coloring the right side of the wing first, and then we'll make our way around. So there's going to be some light reflection from the same area that is coming from the left, so it's going to be a little bit lighter at the top, and then it progressively gets a little bit darker, but not too dark. And when I'm painting, I'm leaving parts of the bottom of the wing open so I can put the midtones to blend easier. Just like this. And now I'm going to color the wings with a little bit of green in it. And usually the hummingbird's feathers are going to be very thin and transparent, so I'm going to reduce the opacity to around 60%. And let's try this. And I really like this color, so I'm going to continue on with this opacity level. And now I'm going to go a bit more pink now and just go around the feathers just like this. And I'll leave some parts open so I can have some nice mixture of colors when I'm blending. And then at this point, I like to go a little bit yellow, bright yellow at the bottom of the feathers. And now moving on with the midtones. And whenever I'm transitioning from different tone levels, I also like to create new layers so it blends a lot easier later on. So I'm adding more darker side of the blue. And with the transitioning of the wing to the arm, I like to keep it a little bit more darker. And since we already are using ambient colors, warmer colors, I like to go with orangey dark colors with this inner part of the wing. But I also like to keep some transition from the wing to the feathers of the arm. I like to keep it a little bit darker green in the inside of the wing. So I use the same color, but a bit darker because it is a bit more over the shoulder. It keeps a little bit darker there. And with the feathers, I'm not going to put any midtones because I want it a lot more transparent, but we are going to add some hard edge layers later on. But I also want the wing to be a little bit more darker here to give more depth. Now moving on to the tutu of the hummingbird, and now it's just going to be a variation of the colors that we already have, and then we're going to nicely put them at the bottom here. And it's going to be very transparent, so it doesn't have to look so perfect. And again, I would like to start with the lightest color, and we'll go with the yellow. And we'll start with a new layer, and then come down from there. And the next color that we're going to use is the same bluish indigo color from the bottom of the hummingbird. And since we're going so light, you could always reduce the opacity of the sketch to see more of what you're coloring. So for me, I'm going to put it around 45%, and then I'll continue coloring. And then from there, I'm going to add some greens. And some over here. And also, don't forget to use some of the pink that we already used at the top. But I also want to put in some of the pink and the blues and the purples of the indigo color that we already have. And now moving on to the midtones. And this tutu, I want it to look like a bit more like a feather. So there's going to be a lot of layers with midtones and light tones and some other layers that we're going to put in. And there's going to be a lot of overlay to give that more variation as well. So since we're going to go a little bit more darker, I also want to see where I'm coloring, where the colors were already put in. So I'm going to reduce the opacity a lot more with the sketch. And to start off, I'm going to use the yellow tone. So moving on with the blue, and it's going to be a little bit more darker than the yellow mid-tone that we use. So it's going to look a bit more layered. So as you can see, the yellow is a bit more transparent and the blues in the back is going to be showing a bit more. And moving on with the greens, I want some of the back to show more, to create a little bit more depth and value. And since we're already at the bottom here, I'm going to paint the foot of the hummingbird. So I'm going to create a new layer and reduce the size to around 10 and use the fine brush. And it's just a small feat, so just follow along with what I'm doing here and put some here and make sure that the back ones are kind of cut off because you can see it's half the other side of the body. And before we start blending, I'm going to add some darker tones of the green. And I'm going to create a new layer because I want the layer to be on the top of every layer we have. It will show a lot more and a lot cleaner. And don't forget the shoulders, the bottom of the wing, as well as the top of the hat. And also don't forget the bottom part of the leg of the hummingbird. Put some dark indigo blues. I also put some more behind the tutu to give it more depth as well. Now we're going to move on and start blending, and we'll start with the body first. Now, just go to the Layers tab and combine wherever bodies of color that you painted. You're going to pinch them. And since we added a new layer of darkness, I'm going to put the body part layer at the top and then combine them as well. I also left the beak, eyes, and the feet separate from the body so it doesn't smudge. So I'll pick the moving blender first, and I chose the 20% size. And we're going to start blending. And I like to use one direction at first, and if you want to come down, just come down using another press as well. And we'll move on to the hat. Make sure you have the selected layer for the hat. And I like to use the kind of a wavy motion to give that watercolor effect. And then I'm going to move on with the wings. And it's going to be very transparent, so you don't have to put a lot of pressure in it. Just light pressure in one direction. And it doesn't have to be perfect because they're going to be blending very well and it's very transparent, so it's a lot forgiving. And make sure that the layers that need to be blended are combined to each other. And now we're going to move on to the bottom part. And you don't have to blend it so perfectly because you do want some of that layer showing from each other. And now we're going to move on with the texture of the body. And first we're going to start with creating a new layer and use the hard edge brush. And keep the size of the brush around 20%. And we're going to pick the color that we want to use. We'll go over the texture part of the body. And we're going to make an oval shape downwards. So when I get closer to the bluer tones of the body, I'm going to use the blue tones again. And some of the darker indigo blue colors as well. And same thing with the green part. And as long as I get going darker and darker, I want to continue to change that. Now, when I'm moving towards the wing part of the hummingbird, I'm going to use more of a half-shaped circle, just like this. Now, moving on with the pink face part of the hummingbird, I'm going to use the fine line brush. And I'm going to use a bit more of a darker shadowy color at the bottom of the mouth of the hummingbird. And again, I'm going to make small circles or oval shapes. And they get smaller as it goes closer to the beak. Now we're going to make some lines throughout the body to give a bit more texture. And now we're going to choose a bit more of a shadowy color from what we had used before. And we're going to reduce the size to around 6 to 7% and use the fine line brush and make around 3 to 4 straight lines downwards, just like this. It just gives a little bit more texture and some reflection of the light of the hummingbird's feathers. Now moving on to the hat, I like to keep some of the creases to show. So I picked the darker color and reduced the size to around 10% using the fine line brush and just follow along creating some of the creases in the hat. And to make the fairy hat more whimsical, we're going to create some light bulbs around the crease of the bottom parts of the hat. So use a fine line brush around 5 or 6%, size level with a bit more peachy orangey color, and you can create a bit more of a wavy motion like this. And we're just going to do a quick loop and leave a small circle area open, just like this. And from there, I like to use a very yellow color. And we're going to actually use one of the brushes that comes with the Procreate app. And it's under Luminous Brush Libraries. And we're going to pick the light pen. And you just fill in the circles that we have created before. It gives a nice glow inside the circle. And now we're going to put some more details in the wings. And now I like to use the hard edge brush, and I like to keep the size to around 20% and pick a color that is green, a bit more darker. And then we're going to go in an upward stroke and make around 2 lines and leave the middle transparent. Just like this. Thing with the blue, and then the ambient orange color in the wings, and then the pink. It'd be helpful if you pick the darker color from the colors that we are painting already. And the same thing that we're doing with the hard edge brush to the tutu area. And we're going to use the size of 20% and go over the layers of the colors of what we want to paint. But rather than just going up and down, we're going to do a half circle. It kind of looks like scales from a butterfly. And I moved on with the blues, the greens, the yellows, and so on. And to give more of that tutu effect, I'm going to pick a white color and I'll use the gouache brush. And then I'll go up to use the gouache layer. And the reason why I'm using the gouache layer, which is at the top above all the background canvas watercolor effects, is because it will be a lot more opaque and show a lot more white. And we're going to keep it to around 5%. And just follow along and make layers just like this. how it originally looked like from the sketch that we already had. And I do want to continue on with the light bulbs, but without the strings in the tutu area to give a bit more beauty into it. And again, I went with the fine line brush and increased to the size to around 10% and use the peachy color that we use with an ambient light. That is the size of a circle that I'm creating. And we're going to go around just like this. And we're going to do the same thing, pick the luminous light brush and yellow tone and fill in the circles that we made. And to give it more of a watercolor effect with stains, we're going to create a new layer and reduce the opacity and go with the size around 30% with the wet on dry brush. And the opacity is going to be around 30%. And pick the color that is a bit dark that you want to use to color on top. And then we start to put some layers. It will give a bit more of a watercolor stain, which is what we want to achieve. And we'll use the same thing with the body from the darker colors and go in a random motion. And you could also use the moving blender to mix in to make it a bit more natural than just watercolor stains. So blend in slightly just like this. And now I'm going to create some shadows by creating a new layer. And I'll pick a very dark blue and reduce the opacity of that layer to around 15%. And I'll use the smooth brush and I'll start painting the shadow parts of the hummingbird, which is the shoulder, the back of the wing, parts of the hat, and anywhere that it will be a shadow when the light is coming from the left. This gives a lot of depth, which brings a lot of the realism back to the painting. Also, don't forget the back of the hummingbird, as well as the beak, and a little bit of the eyes. And now you're going to use the regular blender and blend in some of the shadows to a bit more natural look. And now we're just doing some of the finishing touches. And since we have some of the yellows around the hat and bottom part of the hummingbird, we're going to put some of that in the bird as well. So pick a yellow color and use the smooth brush. And we're just going to put some yellows on the shoulder area and the belly part. And then we're going to use the regular blender and just blend them in nicely. And I want to add some epic splashes or flickers of white on top of the bottom of the hummingbird and a bit on the hat as well. So go back to the gouache layer and we're going to pick the flick brush. And I'm going to choose around 10% size and just go over it just like this. And same thing with the top of the hat as well. And now to get rid of the washi tape, go to the washi tape and border and pick the layer of the tape. And you can pick any big brush that you can use, but I use the oil brush that comes with the Procreate and then just go around it just like this. And you can get rid of the sketch layer as well. Thank you for watching, everybody, and if you have any questions, please comment down below, and have a wonderful day.